All right. Hello and welcome back to another day of online learning. I am Principal Mr. Roll over here, and we have Mr. Levi and Miss Nikki. And I know that we all look like we're getting ready to rob a bank today, but we're doing the right thing, and we're trying to keep our good social distance and wear a mask like all the health agencies want us to. So hopefully you can still hear us okay. Mr. Levi?
We got your guys' stuff all packed up and ready for you to come get it. Anything not picked up by July will be donated to Goodwill. We're here from 10 to 3 every day.
Please make sure that you have all the way through week 9 finished by this weekend. Report cards are coming out in the beginning of June.
Excellent. All right, so that's it for our announcements for this morning. Let's go ahead and everybody stand wherever you are. If you're in your living room, in your bedroom, or whatever, go ahead and stand at attention. If you're wearing a hat like me, please take it off. Place your right hand over your heart, and let's say the Pledge of Allegiance together. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we hope you have a fantastic day of online learning, and we look forward to seeing you so you can come and get your stuff. All right, take care, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye, guys.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Rollback here, and this is our introduction. Oh, creaky chair again. Introduction for today. We're working on week number 9, day number 4. And so, first things first, it's time for me to introduce the hat of the day. This is actually one of my very favorite hats. Now, before I show you this hat, I got to admit, this is actually a hat that I've worn in public in a non-ironic, actual, like, hey, you know, I'm wearing a hat kind of way. Yeah, it's a little bit dusty because it's been a few years, but it's a top hat. Ooh. To be fair, I got this hat when I was the best man in a wedding, and I don't know, a couple times, you know, when I was wearing a suit, I was like, you know what, I'm going to take out this hat, and so got my real top hat here, and I can see why Abraham Lincoln liked that stovepipe hat. It's just kind of fun. I don't know. So I'm going to be wearing this hat for today and tomorrow's lesson. Let's talk about that, by the way. This lesson is coming out a day late, and I know some of you were reaching out to me about it. Props to Allie. You were the first one to contact me about it this morning, Allie, and so I'm recording this Thursday night, unfortunately, because things just got real busy. And so because this is coming out a day late, day 4 and 5 will be coming out at the same time on Friday, which normally it should be, you know, day 4 is on Thursday, day 5 is on Friday. And because this is the last week of grading, I am not going to give you any homework on day 5. Week 9, day 4 is going to be the last day you actually have work, and that's to compensate you for getting this a day late. So I apologize to everybody out there that this is dropping late, but that's my way of kind of hitting you back to make sure that everything's fair, even though I'm a little late. Okay, so for today in life skills, we have a discussion about how to keep your options open, or why it's important to keep your options open in life skills. In economics, we are discussing how supply chains impact cities and countries. I think in reality, we're just talking about how supply chains impact America, more specifically. In history, we're talking about the muckrakers, which are awesome, by the way. I really like those guys and gals. In literature, we're going over chapter 29, reading chapter 30 as our last homework assignment. In science, you have 10 questions in a PDF document that you have to answer. And then for maths group 1 and group 2, we have 2 different things. In math group 1, you just have a PDF document with 4 questions, easy peasy, right? And then in math group 2, you have a Khan Academy Exponents Challenge. And so our math class for the day is pretty short for both of you. All right, let's go ahead and jump into life skills. There we go. So for real, I feel like a magician looking at my own picture wearing this hat. Anyway, we need to talk about life skills, magic tricks aside. So when I was a kid, my mom would take me out for ice cream from time to time. And I'm talking about when I was much younger than you, right? Because, you're all in seventh or eighth grade. I remember we lived in Missouri, or Missouri, as a lot of people called it. And when I was good, and this is like when I was maybe 4 years old, maybe 5 years old, I was an only child, and so I didn't have any brothers or sisters. And if I was really good, she would take me out for ice cream, and and a lot of times she would take me to McDonald's, and we get the little kid cone, and it was a lot of fun. And then one day I learned about this very magical place called Baskin Robbins, and it was also back then it was called 31 Flavors. And so I know out here we have a couple Baskin Robbins in Tucson, and we also have like Cold Stone Creamery and stuff like that. But in my like 4-year-old brain, it broke my mind, because I'd never been in like a real ice cream shop before, and they had 31 flavors, maybe more, and there were things that I'd never even heard of in there, like uh, ice cream with nuts, and like green ice cream with nuts, pistachio. They had cotton candy ice cream, and it was crazy. I loved it. And so whenever my mom would say, "Hey, let's take you out to get some ice cream. Something good happened. You did well today." I always wanted to go to 31 Flavors. Now, here's the funny part. Okay, when we went to 31 Flavors as a little kid, sometimes I would still just get vanilla ice cream. I wouldn't always get something crazy or new or different. Sometimes I'd just get chocolate. Or again, I'd get swirl or something, like they didn't do soft serve. It's like hard ice cream, but you can get like 2 scoops. And so one day my mom commented to me, she's like, hey, if you're just going to get vanilla ice cream, we can just go to McDonald's and it's a lot faster. And I told her, no, I like going to Baskin Robbins because I don't know if I want vanilla ice creams. Sometimes I don't know. I just decide when I see it, you know. Now, why am I telling you this story? Um, as you're going through high school, you don't know what you're going to want when you're done. You don't know what you're going to want for the rest of your life. You don't know what you're going to want to do when you're my age. When you're 20, when you're 25, when you're 30, when you're however old I am, you won't know. But if you're not careful, you're not going to be stuck with the 31 flavors. You're not going to be stuck with all the options that you could have had if you were careful. And so as you're going through high school, don't have it set in your mind that you're just going to do one thing. Don't have it set in your mind that you're just going to be a beautician, or don't have it set in your mind that you're just going to go and do this, or just going to go to this school after you're done, or whatever. Do your very best to leave all of your options open, because when you're 14 or 15 or 16, again, life is a long time, like we were talking about a few weeks ago, and you don't know everything that's in store for your life. I never knew growing up that I would become a teacher. In fact, I thought that was the last thing I wanted to do because, frankly, most of my teachers didn't like me very much, and the feeling was mutual. I didn't really care for them, and so you never know what you're going to do when you grow older. And if you narrow down your choices because of whatever your worldview is when you're 15, then when you're 35, like me, you may not be able to do everything that you want to do in the amount of time that you could have done it. I don't know if that makes any sense. So starting tomorrow and running through the rest of this online lesson time. So for a lot of you, running through the end of our time together, realistically, right? I'm going to be talking about ways to keep your options open. And when I say ways to keep your options open, I mean as you travel through high school, what are the decisions that you can actively make to leave the door open for college, to leave the door open for a trade school, to leave the door open for a military career, or something like that. So what choices can you make to make sure that whatever path in life you want to walk down, you're able to walk down that path? I was online recently, so because of this whole virus thing, we're working with different government agencies, and recently I've had to work with a few politicians, and they bring in their news crews and stuff because they like coverage, and they like news about them so that they get reelected, of course, right? But then what that does to people like me is that sometimes the news will say and do things that aren't true, and people like me will get run over, and so it's very, someone like me has to be careful. And so at these times I have to spend a little bit of time on social media, and I really don't like social media very much, but I have to spend some time on there and make sure that the comments that are being made about the school, about me or whatever, that they're all positive, and if they're negative, I need to address them. So I'm doing this today, and I'm not having very much fun. And then I ran across an old student who was posting something, and he was in my class maybe like 8 to 10 years ago. And he was saying, I wish in high school that they told us that there were other options than college, because all they pushed were college. And I thought about that, and I was like, I told you that college wasn't the only option. Like, I know that I told you this, buddy, and I'm not going to name his name because you could look him up. But I felt like commenting to him and being like, what? Like, no, I told you that. So guys, I'm telling you this now, okay? Because I want you to have all these options, and college is a great option, but it's not your only option, right? And so I hope you listen, because there is a chance that you might be like that other student who was in your seat, 8 to 10 years ago. And, maybe people in high school won't tell you about these options. So, please perk up and at least listen. You don't have to take notes or anything, but at least listen. Don't just skip through this part of the video for these next 6 days that we have together. All right, so that's it. That's my talk about what we're going to be talking about. This is my introductory talk to what our talks for the next 6 days will be about. Again, just keeping your options open. And since this is the last time I get to speak with most of you, this is the message I want you to carry away. How do you keep your options open so that whatever your passion in life turns out to be, you can follow it? All right, and now for a magic trick. A rabbit comes out. Ah. All right, let's go over to current events. Yeah. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, for week number 9, day number 4, we are talking in economics and current events about supply chains, right? So economics, current events. I'm sure for those of you who are watching this in 2020, I know a lot of us are really sad about everything, that all the news, of course, we had all this news about the pandemic, and then we have all this news coming out from Minnesota, and it's been kind of depressing lately, and it really doesn't matter, what your family's politics are or whatnot. It's a tough time, in the news. And so we talked a lot about the future of American space exploration, which we're super excited for. We started off with the learning a little bit about the Artemis missions and whatnot, and before that, we were learning about how economics works, and learning about why a recession has always been expected, but it's not the end of the world for all of you, and so trying to focus more on positive aspects. And so today we want to continue kind of talking about economics, and we just introduce you to the idea of a supply chain, okay? This business theory and the way that things work, where a company doesn't make their product anymore. A company that makes something relies on a set of suppliers, and each supplier contributes what they specialize in, and then the company brings all the goods together, and sometimes they don't even manufacture it from the parts. Like yesterday we were talking about how the iPhone isn't made by Apple, it's made usually by a contractor like Foxtron in China, and they take all the parts using all of the stuff that was invented mostly in the United States, with supplies from all these other places, and then they wrap it up in a box and they put it together. Now, I recently read an article that said that the iPhone was about a little more than, whoa, whoops, what happened there? Where'd I go? Oh, there I am. I'm looking at Boeing there. Let's see here. And in fact, I have the article right back there because I wanted to bring it up for this discussion. I wanted to review it just to make sure. And the article was talking about how, on the face of it, you might think that the iPhone makes up about 0.5% of the United States' GDP. And remember, we talked about GDP, and GDP means gross domestic product. And they were saying that in the United States we have a gross domestic product, so in the USA, of at least 17 trillion. So that's 17,000, 17 million, 17 billion, 17 trillion. And so that's all the goods and services that we as America make every year, right? And so they were saying because the iPhone in sales profits, is 100 billion every year, 100 billion. By the way, so this is the entire United States of America every year. Everything that every citizen in America does every year. This is what Apple makes just off the iPhone every year. Okay, so this is the Apple iPhone profits every year, right? It's just an astounding number. And again, that's not including anything else that Apple does, like the iPads and stuff. And so they were saying, well, really, the iPhone adds about 0.5% of the United States' GDP every year. And they were just kind of going on about how magnificently large that number is, and it is. It's like, I don't mean to be mean or anything, but it's stupidly large. Like, that is such a large number. Like, you and I can't even imagine how much money that is. I mean, really, you know. Now, that's not actually true, though. And why is that? Why is that not true? Okay. Well, it's not true because money going into Apple's bank account is not the same as money going into the United States, and that money is not in the United States. A lot of this money, this $100 billion, isn't even kept in America. A lot of it's kept in accounts in Europe. Like, Apple has bank accounts in Europe. They have bank accounts in Asia, in Australia, South America. And so a lot of that money's not even here in the United States. And so that's incorrect to say, okay? And so when we're talking about GDP, it is incorrect to say that the iPhone is 0.5% of America's GDP. But let's talk about another very American company. Let's talk about Boeing. Now, when we first started talking about economics, that doesn't look right. No, there's no E, is there? Here, that doesn't look right at all. Boeing. No, that's right. Okay. So when we first started talking about economics, I had that picture of the airplanes up, and I told you that eventually this would lead to something and it'd be important. And here it is. Okay, I haven't forgotten about that. And this is kind of where I wanted us to begin to end our conversations for this year. So Boeing is a company that manufactures airplanes. And if you're not familiar with Boeing, and some of you may not be, because I understand that, you're kids and maybe you just never really ventured out here before, okay? Let's look for images of Boeing here. Oh, that's boring. That's Boeing revenue. I want to just see what they make, right? And so all of these wonderful, beautiful airplanes, these are all Boeing airplanes. And so Boeing is the #1 manufacturer of airplanes in the United States. And companies from all around the world purchase Boeing airplanes from the United States, from this amazing company. And so this is one of the largest planes in the world. This is the 747 jumbo jet. And if you've never seen this before, this is one of Boeing's most famous planes because for many years this plane was the largest plane on Earth that you could buy. In fact, NASA actually bought a Boeing 747 to put the space shuttle on top of when they were testing it. And so, they used this plane to literally carry a space shuttle to test whether or not it was flight worthy. Yeah, and as you can see, there's 2 stories on this plane. It's a double-decker plane, and in fact, if you look up Air Force One, okay, where the president flies on, okay, and so if you look up pictures of Air Force One here, see this? So this is Air Force One, the president's plane. The Air Force One plane is a Boeing 747, okay, and it's supposedly one of the best planes on Earth, right? And so Boeing is this incredible company. It's an American company, and it makes these fantastic airplanes, right? But remember when we were talking about Apple here? Apple makes $100 billion. This is $100 billion every year just from the iPhone, and that's it. That one product brings in $100 billion every year. Boom. Okay? Now, Boeing, the whole company of Boeing, and in fact, I think you might have been able to see those numbers here just a second ago. The whole company of Boeing every year, and I'm not going back and super fact-checking this and everything, right? But Google is usually pretty close to right, okay? The entire company of Boeing only brings in $76.5 billion every year. That's their revenue. That's not even their profit. That's just the money they bring in. And so let's take that back, 76 billion, and compare that with our iPhone number here, okay? So our iPhone number is 100 billion, okay? And then Boeing as a company is about 76.5 billion, okay? So that's a million, that's billion. And this is every year. This is what that company is making in revenue, okay? And so Boeing, though, in this really interesting twist, Boeing is 1%. It represents 1% of U.S. GDP. So how's that possible? How is Boeing 1% of the $17 trillion of the American economy when the iPhone, which brings in significantly more money than everything Boeing makes in a year, the iPhone brings in, and how is the iPhone not even 0.5%? Well, the answer lies in the supply chain, okay? And so Apple's supply chain, like we talked about yesterday, it's mostly in Asia. So in the United States, we come up with the best thinking that goes into designing the iPhone, but all of the parts and components come from different Asian companies. So the camera sensor in the iPhone for the past few years has been made by Sony. You know, the company that makes the PlayStation 4, Sony, the company that started Sony Pictures, they don't own it anymore, they sold it. But so that company, Sony, is the company that makes the camera for the iPhone, all right? Samsung, that makes the Galaxy phones, they make the screens and sometimes the memory chips. LG, that makes TVs and washing machines, and so makes the other parts. And so all of these companies, which mostly are in Asia, make the different parts for the iPhone. Now, for Boeing, even though Boeing makes a lot less money than Apple, a whole lot less money. In fact, Apple could buy Boeing 5 or 6 times just with the money that they have in savings, and they would still have plenty of money. So Apple is so much bigger than Boeing in terms of its scale, which is nuts, and that's for another day. But Boeing is 1% of the United States' GDP because of its supply chain. Boeing's supply chain is mostly located in America, and they have a few main suppliers in Europe. But Boeing is mostly an American company that buys from other American companies, okay? And so when Boeing is trying to manufacture a plane, Boeing is not going to mostly European or Asian companies to buy different parts, okay? If we look up Boeing here, Boeing mostly buys its parts from these companies. Spirit Aerosystems, where they buy the body of the plane, the fuselage, or the aerostructures, the frame of the plane. Precision Cast Parts, the Triumph Group, Pratt & Whitney, Collins Aerospace, Honeywell, General Electric. And so these companies are located in the United States for the most part, okay? And so here's an article that talks about that. And so Boeing makes up about 1% of the United States' GDP because of that. Oh, let me find my little, where did my other window go here? Here we go. Yep. Ha, there we go. And so, again, the idea is if you are a Boeing, and, oops, hey, how come you're not moving? Whatever. So if you're buying different parts of the plane, and just because I'm not I'm not an artist, nor am I an aerospace engineer. Okay, this is my fuselage. Okay, they're buying the fuselage in the United States. Okay, they're buying the aerostructures that make the wings in the United States. They're buying the engine components. This is my impression of what a Boeing engine looks like on a jet plane. Okay. Oh boy, that's really crummy. Oh yeah. Well, because it's all in the United States and most of their part suppliers are, this $76.5 billion is what Boeing makes, but maybe their suppliers will, maybe the supplier that makes the fuselage, maybe they every year make $50 billion, okay? And if they're an American company, that also gets added to America's GDP. And maybe the company that makes the wings for the planes, maybe they're making $15 billion. Okay? And on and on and on. And because the supply chain is US based, this one US company, if Boeing went out of business, the United States, on a sum total, would lose 1% of this very large number, $17 trillion. Okay? And so if we do the math on this, $17 trillion, again, thousand, million, billion, trillion, okay? And if we look at 1%, what we have to do is we have to basically get rid of 2 zeros here. Okay, that's 10% right now. And now that's 1%. And then we're going to redo our commas. So that's 1, 2, 3, comma. 1, 2, 3, comma, 1, 2, 3, comma, okay? And so that new complete total is $170 billion. Oh, is that too many? Okay, that's 1,000, million, billion, okay? $170 billion of value. So this one company adds $170 billion of value to the United States every single year. And if Boeing were to go bankrupt or disappear, like in, let's say, in some terrible magical world where the Wicked Witch of the West made Boeing disappear, $170 billion of value would suddenly vanish from the United States every year, because that's how much money rests on this one company because of the supply chain being located here in the United States. So supply chains and supply chain management, where companies buy their stuff and how they manage getting that stuff, are very, very important. And so we will talk more tomorrow about how that could be affecting you in the future in terms of what you want to do for a living, or maybe what you're not interested in doing for a living. So we're going to talk more about this tomorrow. But I hope that maybe you learned something today. I know it's just kind of me rambling in a weird top hat. But again, I hope that you're taking something away from this. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, today for our discussion for history, we are reading about the muckrakers. Now, be careful when you say the word muckraker, of course, okay? But muckrakers were, today when you use the word muckraker, it's often used as an insult, I've heard, in more modern times. A muckraker is somebody who spreads overblown news. So maybe an issue isn't as bad as maybe a newspaper or a news show says it is, but they make a big deal out of it so that they can have a better story and get more people to watch it or buy their paper. But muckrakers originally, back in the late early 1900s, were they were investigative journalists who changed the United States. And so muckrakers were incredibly important in improving life for everyone in America. And kind of the epicenter of the muckraker movement was in this one magazine called McClure's Magazine. And McClure's Magazine was run by this short, very pioneering, very domineering man named McClure, and he had the vision to make a magazine that was not just for entertainment purposes, but had real meat to it. And so he hired a cast of reporters that did very interesting stories. And these stories were not always done for the purposes of changing America for the better. These stories were just interesting and important stories. So he hired a young reporter named Ida Tarbell. And it was interesting because Ida is a woman's name, and so Ida was a woman, and she became famous for doing a series of reports on Abraham Lincoln. And in fact, in class we talk a lot about Abraham Lincoln and the people around him, and how their relationships were and what their interactions were. To tell you the absolute truth, Ida Tarbell is the reason why we have most of this information. Remember, Abraham Lincoln was a nobody when he was growing up. He was just a poor kid with a really sad backstory who suddenly became a national figure and became president in a very short span of time. And so his life and everything else wasn't very well documented. And everybody loved Lincoln, but he was almost like a Greek god. You know, people looked at Abraham Lincoln like, oh, this amazing man just kind of came out of the sky and saved America from the Civil War. We love him, and boy, he died, and he's a martyr, and he'll always be a hero. And that's most of what people knew. But Ida Tarbell did a series of reports because when she started this back in the 1890s,
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Oh, come on, Siri, come on. Anyway, when she started this back in the 1890s, right, most of Abraham Lincoln's neighbors and old friends were still alive. And so they were very old at this time, but she actually went back to the places where Lincoln grew up. And she discovered facts about Lincoln and his family and the people around him and what they really thought about him and what his life was really like. And she published these stories, and people were just mesmerized by it because it was kind of like learning that your real life Superman was like a normal guy. And so everybody fell in love with this amazing reporter, Ida Tarbell, and the incredible amount of digging that she did. And people came to love and trust her and McClure's Magazine as an arbiter of good information. And because of this love and this trust that people had in Ida Tarbell and the other muckraking journalists at McClure's Magazine, people began subscribing to McClure's and getting really interested in learning about like the truth of things. Yeah. And so today we have books about how things are made, and we have books about what things are really like and all of that. And all of these kinds of literature and television shows that we might stream, they all have their roots coming from McClure's Magazine and these reporters who first popularized that idea of educational programming and educational writing that is engaging and exciting. And so after McClure's became this smash hit, right, the journalists went out and they started doing other work. And this eventually led to, I think we talked about the other day, The Jungle, which was a Chicago meatpacking industry by a guy named Upton Sinclair. He wrote an entire book about it. And so it began causing social change and blah, 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 right? But Theodore Roosevelt, you probably knew I was coming back to him, all right? Theodore Roosevelt was a progressive, and he was trying to change things. And Theodore Roosevelt was smart enough to tap into the credibility of the muckrakers. And so Theodore Roosevelt enhanced the muckrakers, and in turn, the muckrakers made Theodore Roosevelt, it's almost like hot air in a balloon and it just rises, right? They made Theodore Roosevelt like that everyday, they made him a public hero. So Theodore Roosevelt was trying to improve things like garment factories. He was trying to improve laws. He was trying to fight corruption in the Republican Party. And he needed a vehicle to get the public's opinion on his side. And at McClure's and the other muckrakers that were out there, he found his perfect army of people who were interested in exposing corruption and interested in improving everyday lives. And so he harnessed the power of the muckrakers, and he actually became good friends with the muckrakers, and he knew the different reporters on a first-name basis. And they would have lunch together and things like that. And so he would give them information, and they would give him information. And sometimes he would be their secret sources within the government. And by using this, by leveraging the power of the muckrakers, Theodore Roosevelt was able to make America a lot better. And this power and leverage that he had with them followed him all the way into the White House. So when he became president after William McKinley died, and then he was elected 2 more times after that, he 2 more times, 1 more time, I don't know. He was president for like 8 years plus, or no. Was it 7 years? I think he was president for 7 years. Anyway, I need to go back and reread some stuff. But in office, the same muckraking journalists that he used when he was at the Department of the Navy and when he was governor of New York, these same journalists were now on the White House beat. And so it is Theodore Roosevelt who popularized the White House briefing. And so today, we have the president doing briefings over coronavirus and stuff like that. Teddy Roosevelt was the guy who first really made that a thing, where, the journalists would all be sitting there and the president would be at the front answering questions and having a back and forth. And so that really was kind of like the gasoline to the car of Theodore Roosevelt's movement. Was these muckraking journalists who combined forces with him to make America a more fair and just society and to propel Theodore Roosevelt into historical fame. So anyway, please read about the muckrakers. You're going to read about 2 Idas. Ida Tarbell was one that we talked about, and the other one, I think it's Ida Wells. She's a very interesting character because she's African American. She's a woman and she's African American in a time where African Americans did not really have equal rights to everybody else, and yet she was still able to make such a strong impact. Very, very interesting woman that should be read about and remembered. So, okay, go ahead and read about that today, and hopefully, you take something with you there. Thanks. All right, so for today's literature, you were supposed to read chapter 29. And so chapter 29 is exciting. And it also kind of goes back to Tom Sawyer, like going back to just like not really being a great friend for Huck because he's too in love, which is, it's kind of cute, and that's just who Tom is and whatnot. So anyway, Tom finds out that Becky just came back. I think she was in Constantinople, and he has the opportunity of a lifetime because his Becky's mother asks her if she wants to go down to a friend's house, and I guess she tells Becky to spend a night at a friend's house, and instead of spending the night at the friend's house, Tom convinces her to play with him and go out with him instead. And they're going to take the ferry and go down to the widow's house because she's really nice, and he figures that the widow will let them stay the night there and probably give them some ice cream. And so she agrees, and so they board the ferry and they go exploring in a cave. They have lunch and see a play, and they do some other stuff, and then they come back, and so Tom is just off having like his romantic date with a Becky. So anyway, while this is going on, Huck is standing guard, and he sees the people who he suspects are Joe, the evil Joe, and the other guy, and so he follows them. and he follows them to the widow's house. And he hears them outside the widow's house talking about how they want revenge on the widow for her husband. So remember, the widow's husband used to be the justice of the peace. It was the same justice of the peace where, where do you remember Tom? He joined he joined the troop, the church troop, and the only reason why he joined is because he got that nice suit, and he wanted to show off his suit in front of everyone, and so. It's kind of terrible, but he was waiting for the judge to die so he could show up at the funeral wearing the suit and show off the suit to everybody in town. And then when the judge didn't die, he quit the troop, and then the judge died right after that, right? So it's kind of ironic that we come full circle back to that. And so they're waiting outside, and it's Widow McDougal. They're waiting outside her house, and they're getting ready to really like maim her in this really gross way where they're going to like rip open her nose and do some other stuff to her face. It's really gross. And so Huck flips out and he's like, I got to do something. And so he runs down the hill to the Welshman's house. And the Welshman has a couple sons, and they let him in, and he frantically tells them what's going on. And so the Welshman grabs the guns, and his sons grab their rifles, and they all run off up the hill. And a few moments later, Huck, who's trying to catch up to them, hears gunfire, and then chapter ends. So it looks like Huckleberry Finn saved the widow's life. It's pretty epic, huh? So, I mean, Tom had a good date, but Huckleberry Finn became a real-life hero. And so anyway, that's the end of chapter 29. Please, for your homework, it's the last literature homework, guys. So it's the last chance to do a grade for your spelling and for your lit. So go ahead and read the next chapter, chapter 30, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. Thanks. Okay, so for science today, for both today and tomorrow, we have a PDF document with 10 questions. And so don't freak out, these 10 questions, they're not like gotcha, very difficult questions. They're all either true, false, or they're multiple choice, okay? And so please take your time in answering these questions. Again, these questions are designed to force you to make sure that you go back and understand the basics about these simple machines and efficiency and mechanical advantage. So again, please download the PDF and answer these questions, send them in to Mr. Barbero and myself, and we'll be good to go. Thanks, guys. Okay, so group number 1 for math. You have a couple questions today in a PDF, and you have a few questions for tomorrow. And I think there's only 4 questions for today and 4 questions for tomorrow, and that's going to round out your math grade for this year. All right. The questions are all dealing with combinations, and so don't forget, when you're doing combinations, you can either make a list or you can make the tree diagram. Now, I want to see your work. Don't just say the answer is 6. No, I don't want to know just what the answer is. I want to see the work. If you show me the work, but you get the wrong answer, you still get full credit. All right, and so you need to work on making lists or making tree diagrams to answer the questions for today's work and for tomorrow's work. And again, we're not learning anything new today or tomorrow to kind of round out the grading portion of the year. Now, next week, we will be learning some new stuff for math. I want to try to go over a few things that I think that maybe we need some review in. And again, for those of you who are not returning next year because you're going to high school, very exciting, I want to make sure that we cover some stuff that you'll probably need to know for high school so that you're better prepared. All right, hey, well, thanks, and go ahead and get to that work. Have a great rest of your day, folks. All right, group number 2. So your work today is the Exponent Challenge on Khan Academy. Now, today's assignment is the last math assignment for the year. After that, nothing else is going to be looked at. And all of next week, we are just doing basic lessons that I think would be a good review for you before going to high school. Today, we're doing the Exponent Challenge, and tomorrow, we're reviewing scientific notation. I know a couple of you really got the scientific notation down. but a lot of us don't, and so it's really important that we go over that. Scientific notation is, oh, I'm getting a phone call. Oh, let me just round it out by saying scientific notation is important for doing science in large numbers, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Take care.